The dust of Montana Territory clung to Eleanor Hartwell's torn skirts as she stumbled through the doors of the Last Chance Saloon in Silver Ridge. Her hands trembled as she reached into the pocket of her traveling dress, fingers closing around the only thing of value she had left, her grandmother's garnet ring, the gold band worn thin from 3 generations of wear. "Please," she whispered to the barkeep, a grizzled man with suspicious eyes. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. This ring, it's real gold, just a meal and a place to sleep tonight." The man barely glanced at her outstretched palm. "We don't trade in jewelry, miss. Cash only." His gaze swept over her disheveled appearance with open disdain. "And we don't rent rooms to women traveling alone. Causes trouble." Eleanor's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. Behind her, she could hear the rumble of wagons, traders who might carry word back to Cheyenne, back to Silas Blackwood, the man her father had sold her to like livestock to pay his gambling debts. She'd fled 3 days ago, stealing away in the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and her grandmother's ring, the ring her mother had pressed into her palm with her dying breath, making Eleanor promise to never let any man take it from her. Now, she was prepared to trade it for a bowl of stew. The lady won't be needing to trade anything. Before we continue with Eleanor and this mysterious stranger's story, I'd love to ask a small favor. If you're enjoying this tale, please take just a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and leave a like on this video. Your support truly motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. It means everything to us. Now, let's get back to Eleanor. The voice came from behind her, deep, steady, with the kind of quiet authority that made men listen. Eleanor turned to find a man rising from a corner table, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his worn work shirt. Dark brown hair touched his collar, and his eyes, gray as a winter storm, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I said," he repeated, moving toward them with the fluid grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. "She won't be trading anything. Put whatever she needs on my account, Charlie." The barkeep straightened immediately. "Sure thing, Mr. Garrett. I didn't realize the lady was with you." "She is now." Those storm-gray eyes met Eleanor's, and something in their depths made her feel seen in a way she hadn't been in years. "Name's Jacob Garrett. I run the Triple G Ranch about 5 miles north of here." He gestured to an empty table. "You look like you could use a meal and some answers, in that order." Eleanor clutched the ring tighter, instinct warring with desperation. This man was a stranger, and she'd learned the hard way that accepting help from men always came with a price. But her stomach cramped with hunger, and the thought of Silas Blackwood's cruel hands finding her again made her decision. "Eleanor Hartwell," she said quietly, allowing him to guide her to the table. "And I can work for the meal. I'm a good cook, and I can clean, mend." "Eat first," Jacob interrupted gently, signaling the barkeep. "We'll figure out the rest after you've got some food in you." When the stew arrived, thick with beef and potatoes, steam rising with the scent of rosemary and black pepper, Eleanor had to force herself not to fall on it like a starving animal. She ate slowly, aware of Jacob's gaze on her, assessing, but not judging. He'd ordered coffee for himself. Those calloused hands, the hands of a man who worked his own land, wrapped around the tin cup. "You're running from something," he said after she'd eaten half the bowl. It wasn't a question. Eleanor's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "That's my business, Mr. Garrett." "It is," he agreed. until whoever you're running from shows up in Silver Ridge asking questions. Then it becomes everybody's business." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm not asking to pry, Miss Hartwell. I'm asking because I might be able to help." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Old pain, carefully banked. "Let's just say I know what it looks like when someone's fighting to survive. And I know what it's like to wish someone had offered help when it mattered." Eleanor studied him, really looked at him, for the first time. There was a thin scar along his jawline, nearly hidden by the shadow of stubble. His hands, though clean, bore the permanent stains and calluses of ranch work. But it was his eyes that held her. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen loss and come through it changed. "My father owed money to a man named Silas Blackwood," she heard herself saying. $20,000 from card games and bad investments. When he couldn't pay, Blackwood said he'd forgive the debt if my father signed a marriage contract, binding in territorial law. Jacob's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "I ran 3 nights ago. I don't have money. I don't have family anymore, and I don't have anywhere to go." She met his gaze directly. "And Silas Blackwood is not the kind of man who lets anyone take what he considers his property." "You're not property," Jacob said, and the quiet fury in his voice made her shiver. "You're a person, and any contract signed under duress isn't worth the paper it's written on." Try telling that to a territorial judge who plays cards with Blackwood every Saturday night. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, those storm-gray eyes never leaving her face. Finally, he spoke. "I need help at the Triple G. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, passed 2 months back. The house is a disaster. I've been living on burnt steak and bitter coffee, and I'm losing time I should spend on ranch work, trying to cook and clean." He paused. "I can offer you room and board, wages of $30 a month, and a place where no one will bother you. In return, you keep the house, cook meals, and help with the accounts if you can figure." Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. It was too good to be true. There had to be a catch. "And what else would you expect in return, Mr. Garrett?" Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that might have been sadness. "Nothing else, Miss Hartwell. You'd have your own room with a lock on the door. You're free to leave whenever you choose. And if Blackwood comes looking, he'll find that Judge Morrison isn't the only man with influence in Montana Territory." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My family's been ranching here since before statehood was even discussed. We have some sway of our own." "Why?" she whispered again. "Why are you doing this?" Jacob looked down at his coffee, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. "I had a sister once, Sarah. She got mixed up with the wrong man, charming bastard who showed his true colors after the wedding. By the time I found out what he was doing to her, it was too late. She died in a fall down the stairs. At least that's what Doc Parker wrote on the death certificate." Eleanor's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just let me help you." He looked up, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her chest ache. "I couldn't save Sarah, but I can offer you a chance to save yourself. A real chance. Not just a meal and a night's sleep." The ring pressed against her palm, a reminder of promises and heritage. Her grandmother had been strong, had survived the trip west, had built a life in harsh territory, had raised 5 children on frontier determination. Eleanor felt that strength flowing through her now, mixing with something new. Hope. "All right, Mr. Garrett," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I accept your offer." "Jacob," he corrected gently. "If we're going to be working together, Might as well use first names. Jacob. She tested the name, found it fit him somehow. And I'm Eleanor. Well then, Eleanor. He stood and extended his hand, offering, not demanding. Let's get you home. Home. The word resonated somewhere deep in her chest as she placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused, completely engulfing hers. But his grip was gentle, careful, as though she were something precious, rather than broken. As they left the saloon, Eleanor slipped her grandmother's ring back onto her finger where it belonged. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in 3 days, in 3 years, if she was honest, she felt like she might survive it. The Triple G Ranch sprawled across a valley where the earth met the sky in shades of gold and sage. The ranch house itself was larger than Eleanor expected. 2 stories of solid timber with a wraparound porch and windows that caught the late afternoon sun. Behind it, she could see the barn, corrals, and bunkhouse where Jacob's ranch hands lived. "It's beautiful," she breathed as Jacob helped her down from the wagon. "It's home," he said simply. Or it was. Hasn't felt much like it since. He trailed off, but Eleanor understood. Loss had a way of haunting the places we loved most. Inside, the house told the story of a man trying and failing to maintain order alone. Dishes piled in the kitchen, dust coated the furniture, and papers covered every surface. But underneath the neglect, Eleanor could see good bones. A stone fireplace, sturdy furniture made by skilled hands, and details that spoke of a woman's touch now absent. "Mrs. Chen?" Eleanor asked softly. Jacob nodded. "She came west with the railroad workers. Her husband died building the line, and she stayed on, became part of our family. Sarah loved her. When Sarah died, Mrs. Chen stayed with me. Said she wasn't about to let this place fall apart." His voice roughened. Heart gave out in her sleep. Doc said she never felt any pain. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, meaning it. This house had known love and loss in equal measure. "Your room's upstairs, second door on the left," Jacob said, clearly needing to move past the grief. "There's a lock on the inside. Key on the dresser. Washroom's at the end of the hall. Well, water comes right to the tap, which I know is fancy for out here, but my father insisted on the convenience." He hesitated. "I'm in the master bedroom downstairs. Seemed wrong to take Sarah's old room, and I wanted to be on the ground floor in case anything happened on the property. In case trouble came looking." Eleanor understood that too. "I'll show you around properly tomorrow," Jacob continued. "For now, get settled. There's a trunk of Sarah's clothes in the room. She'd want you to have them. You two are about the same size." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Eleanor, the hands eat breakfast at 6 in the bunkhouse. I usually grab coffee and biscuits around 7 before heading out. But there's no rush. Take tomorrow to get your bearings." "I'll have breakfast ready at 7, Eleanor said firmly. She might have accepted charity to survive, but she would earn her keep. Pride was one of the few things Silas Blackwood hadn't managed to steal from her. Jacob studied her for a moment, then nodded. 7 it is. After he left, Eleanor climbed the stairs slowly, her hand trailing along the smooth banister. The room he'd indicated was at the front of the house, with windows overlooking the valley. The furniture was simple but well made, a brass bed with a thick quilt, a dresser with an oval mirror, a rocking chair by the window, and as promised, a lock on the door with the key sitting beside an oil lamp. Eleanor turned the lock, heard the bolt slide home, and felt something inside her chest unclench for the first time in days. The trunk at the foot of the bed contained clothes that made her throat tighten, simple calico dresses, a Sunday dress in deep blue, a warm shawl, undergarments, and a pair of sturdy boots. All carefully folded, smelling faintly of lavender. These had belonged to Sarah, the sister who died too young, at the hands of a man who should have protected her. Eleanor ran her fingers over the blue dress, feeling the quality of the fabric. "I'll take care of him," she whispered to the ghost in these clothes. "Your brother. I'll take care of him as well as I can." That night, Eleanor lay in a real bed for the first time since fleeing Cheyenne, listened to the wind whisper across the valley, and let herself cry, not from fear or grief, but from sheer relief. She was safe. For now, she was safe. The next morning, Eleanor woke before dawn from habit rather than any clock. She dressed in one of Sarah's calico dresses, brown with small yellow flowers, braided her copper hair, and made her way downstairs to face the disaster that was Jacob Garrett's kitchen. 2 hours later, when Jacob emerged from his room at 6:45, he stopped dead in the kitchen doorway. The chaos was gone. Dishes cleaned and stacked, surfaces scrubbed, floor swept. The coffee pot bubbled on the stove, filling the air with rich aroma. And at the table sat fresh biscuits, scrambled eggs with wild onions, bacon fried crispy, and a jar of what looked like apple preserves. "Morning," Eleanor said, wiping her hands on an apron she'd found in the pantry. "I hope you're hungry. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made a bit of everything." Jacob moved into the room like a man in a dream. "You didn't have to do all this. I said to take the day." "I'm not good at sitting idle," Eleanor interrupted. "Besides, this is what you hired me for, isn't it? Keeping house?" "I suppose it is." Jacob poured himself coffee, took a sip, and his eyes widened. "This is the best coffee I've had in 2 months." "The trick is eggshells in the grounds," Eleanor said, pleasure warming her at his reaction. "Cuts the bitterness. My mother taught me." She hesitated. "I hope you don't mind, but I went through the pantry and larder. You're low on flour, sugar, and salt. The bacon was on the edge of turning. I saved it, but you'll need to smoke more soon. And your root cellar could use organizing." Jacob sat down at the table, looking slightly stunned. "I've been meaning to get to town for supplies. But the cattle needed rotating to new grazing, and one of the windmills broke. And make me a list of what you need," Eleanor said. "If one of your hands is going to town, I can prepare it." They ate in companionable silence, and Eleanor found herself relaxing slightly. Jacob ate like a man who appreciated good food but wasn't precious about it. Efficient, appreciative, with none of the demanding criticism she'd endured from her father or the possessive commentary Silas had subjected her to during their one formal dinner. "The dress fits well," Jacob said after a while, his voice careful. "Sarah would be glad to know her things are being used." Eleanor looked down at the calico. She had good taste, practical but pretty. That was Sarah. Nothing fancy, but everything done right. Jacob set down his fork. "Listen, Eleanor, about the work arrangement. You're not a servant here. You're an employee, which means you get Sundays off, reasonable working hours, and if you need anything, clothes, personal items, whatever, let me know and we'll get it. Pay the hands at the end of each month. Same goes for you." "That's very fair," Eleanor said softly. "It's decent," Jacob corrected. "There's a difference." He stood, placed his dishes in the wash basin. "I need to ride out to the north pasture today. Check on the herd. Probably won't be back until evening. If you need anything, Tom Reeves is the foreman. He's usually in the barn or the bunkhouse. He knows to give you whatever help you need." Eleanor nodded, already mentally planning her day. The house needed deep cleaning. The accounts needed reviewing, and she wanted to inventory the pantry properly. Eleanor? Jacob paused at the door, his hat in his hands. The morning light caught the strong planes of his face, the silver threading through the dark hair at his temples. Thank you. For the breakfast. For all of this. It's been nice to walk into a home instead of just a house. Then he was gone, leaving Eleanor alone with the echo of words that settled somewhere deep in her chest. The days fell into a rhythm. Eleanor woke early, prepared breakfast, cleaned, mended, and gradually brought order to the chaos of the Triple G. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the hand schedules, the daily tasks, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. Jacob left early and returned at dusk, always stopping to wash up at the pump before coming inside. Their conversations over dinner were brief at first, both of them navigating the strange intimacy of shared space with careful politeness. But gradually, as Eleanor proved herself capable and Jacob proved himself trustworthy, they began to talk. Really talk. "How did you learn to shoot?" Eleanor asked one evening, noticing the rifle mounted above the fireplace. "My father," Jacob said, following her gaze. "He believed everyone on a ranch should know how to handle a gun. Rattlesnakes, coyotes, the occasional rustler. He taught me and Sarah both." A shadow crossed his face. "Lot of good it did." "I don't know how," Eleanor admitted. "To shoot, I mean. My father thought it wasn't ladylike." Jacob looked at her thoughtfully. "Would you like to learn?" Eleanor's heart skipped. "Could I? Don't see why not. Out here, being ladylike doesn't count for much when a rattler's between you and the house." He smiled slightly. "Besides, if you're going to be living on a ranch, you should know how to protect yourself." The next Sunday, her day off, Jacob took her to a small clearing behind the barn. He brought 2 rifles, a box of ammunition, and a row of empty tin cans set up on the fence. "All right," he said, handing her the lighter of the 2 rifles. "First rule, never point a gun at anything you don't intend to shoot. Second rule, always assume it's loaded. Third rule, know your target and what's behind it." Eleanor held the rifle awkwardly, unsure where to put her hands. "Here." Jacob moved behind her, his chest nearly brushing her back as he adjusted her grip. "Left hand here, supporting the barrel. Right hand here, finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Stock tight against your shoulder. It's going to kick, and you don't want it bruising your collarbone." Eleanor could barely breathe. Jacob was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the soap and leather and something uniquely him. His hands covered hers, positioning her fingers, and she felt every point of contact like a brand. Now, his voice was low, speaking directly into her ear. "Look down the barrel. See those 2 sights? Line them up with your target. When they're aligned and you're ready, squeeze the triggers slowly. Don't jerk it." Eleanor tried to focus on the tin can, but her awareness was entirely on the man behind her. The solid strength of him, the careful way he touched her, as though she might break, or as though he was afraid of breaking her. "Breathe," Jacob murmured. "In, out, then squeeze on the exhale." She followed his instruction, felt the rifle kick against her shoulder, heard the crack of the shot echo across the valley. The tin can remained untouched. "Good first try," Jacob said, stepping back. Eleanor immediately missed his warmth. "You've got the basics. Now do it again." They spent 2 hours in that clearing. Eleanor missed far more than she hit, but by the end, she'd knocked down 3 cans, and had a purple bruise forming on her shoulder. Jacob noticed her wincing when she raised the rifle the final time. "That's enough for today," he said, taking the rifle from her. "You'll be sore tomorrow. I should have given you more padding." "I'll survive," Eleanor said, but she couldn't quite hide the grimace when she rolled her shoulder. "Come on," Jacob said, surprising her by taking her elbow gently. "Let's get you back to the house. I know what'll help with the bruising." In the kitchen, he had her sit at the table while he disappeared into the pantry, returning with a small tin of salve. "Mrs. Chen's recipe works wonders on bruises and sore muscles." He hesitated, holding the tin. That is, you could apply it yourself, to your shoulder." Eleanor looked at him, saw the careful respect in his eyes, the way he held himself back, and she made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "Could you?" she asked softly. "I can't reach it properly myself." Jacob swallowed hard, nodded. "Turn around." Eleanor shifted in the chair, presenting her back to him. Her dress had cap sleeves, leaving her shoulders mostly bare. She heard Jacob's breath catch when he saw the bruise, already darkening from pink to purple. "This might hurt a bit," he warned. And then his fingers were on her skin. Eleanor gasped. Not from pain, but from the sensation of his touch. Gentle, careful, those calloused fingers moving in slow circles as he worked the salve into her bruised flesh. She could feel the warmth of his palm, the controlled strength in his hands. "Eleanor," Jacob's voice was rough, "if this is uncomfortable." "It's not," she said quickly. Too quickly. It helps. Thank you." They stayed like that for a long moment, Jacob's hand on her shoulder, both of them acutely aware of the intimacy of the position. Finally, he stepped back, clearing his throat. "All done. Should feel better by tomorrow." Eleanor turned to face him, saw the careful distance he'd put between them. "Jacob?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for teaching me, for—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything, the shooting lesson, the salve, the patience, the respect, for all of it. Something shifted in his storm-gray eyes. "You don't need to thank me, Eleanor. You're not a burden. You're—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with something. "You're welcome here. Really welcome. Not just as the housekeeper." He left before she could respond, but his words echoed through her mind for the rest of the evening. "You're welcome here." As spring turned toward summer, the work on the Triple G intensified. Calves were born and needed branding. Fences required mending, and the first cutting of hay filled the barn with the sweet smell of dried grass. Eleanor found herself drawn more and more into the rhythm of ranch life, moving beyond housekeeping into partnership. She learned to help with the accounts, her neat handwriting filling ledgers with income and expenses. She learned the names of all the hands and their preferences for meals. She learned which cattle were troublesome, which horses were gentle enough for beginners, and how to read the sky for coming weather. And she learned Jacob Garrett. She learned that he woke before dawn every morning and stood on the porch with his coffee, watching the sun paint the valley in shades of rose and gold. She learned that he had a scar on his ribs from a bull that had nearly killed him 5 years back. She learned that he read poetry, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson, and sometimes quoted lines under his breath while working. She learned that he was kind to everyone, from his newest ranch hand to the elderly widow in town who sold eggs. She learned that he had turned down 3 offers to sell the Triple G to investors who wanted to turn it into a commercial operation. She learned that his word was his bond, and that he valued loyalty above all else. and she learned that she was falling in love with him. It happened gradually, then all at once, in the way he brought her wildflowers he'd found while checking the fence line, simple prairie roses and Indian paintbrush. In the way he always asked her opinion on ranch decisions, genuinely listening to her thoughts. In the way he made sure she had everything she needed, but never made her feel obligated or owned. In the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was something precious and impossible and worth protecting. But Eleanor also saw the walls Jacob had built around his heart. The way he never let their conversations drift too personal. The way he maintained careful physical distance, as though afraid one wrong move would shatter the fragile peace they'd built. The way he sometimes looked at her with naked longing, then turned away as though punishing himself for the feeling. Sarah's ghost lived in this house, Eleanor realized. Not literally, but in Jacob's guilt and grief. He blamed himself for not saving his sister, and he'd built a fortress around his heart to ensure he'd never care that much, never hurt that much again. Summer arrived with heat that shimmered off the prairie and storms that rolled in from the mountains like dark promises. It was during one such storm that everything changed. Eleanor was in the garden behind the house, trying to harvest the last of the early peas before the storm hit. The sky had turned greenish-black, and the wind whipped her skirts around her legs. She could hear thunder rumbling in the distance, growing closer. "Eleanor!" Jacob's voice carried across the yard. "Get inside! Storm's coming in fast!" She grabbed her basket and ran for the house, but the storm was faster. The first drops of rain hit like bullets, followed immediately by hail, chunks of ice the size of walnuts that hammered down from the sky. Eleanor cried out as one caught her temple, sending pain exploding through her skull. She stumbled, disoriented, and then Jacob was there, pulling her against his chest, his body curving over hers as a shield as he ran them both toward the porch. They burst through the kitchen door just as the full fury of the storm unleashed. Jacob kicked the door shut, still holding Eleanor against him, both of them breathing hard. Rain and melted hail dripped from their clothes, pooling on the floor. "Are you all right?" Jacob demanded, pulling back to look at her. His eyes widened. "You're bleeding." Eleanor touched her temple, felt wetness, saw red on her fingers. "It's just a cut." "The hail?" "Sit down." Jacob guided her to a chair, his hands gentle but insistent. He grabbed a clean towel from the sideboard, pressed it to her temple. "Hold that there. I need to see how bad it is." "I'm fine, really." "You are not fine. You're bleeding." His voice was rough with something that might have been fear. Just let me take care of you, please." The please undid her. Eleanor held the towel to her head while Jacob disappeared into the washroom, returning with water, clean cloths, and the medicine box. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her chin gently in his hand as he examined the cut. "Not too deep," he said after a moment, relief evident in his voice. "But head wounds bleed like the devil. Going to need cleaning and probably a stitch or two." "You know how to stitch?" Eleanor asked, trying not to focus on how close he was, the intensity in his eyes as he threaded a needle with steady hands. "Did a lot of field medicine during the cattle drives when I was younger. Hold still, this might hurt." "I've had worse," Eleanor said, then immediately regretted it when she saw Jacob's jaw tighten. "I know you have," he said quietly. "But you shouldn't have had to, and you won't. Not while you're under my protection." He cleaned the wound with careful touches, his fingers impossibly gentle. Eleanor focused on his face, the concentration in his eyes, the small crease between his brows, the way he bit his lower lip slightly as he worked. When he began to stitch, she didn't flinch, didn't look away from his face. "You're brave," Jacob murmured, tying off the final stitch. "Braver than you should have to be." "I learned from necessity," Eleanor said. "My mother used to say that women are steel wrapped in silk. We bend, but we don't break." "Your mother was right." Jacob sat back on his heels, but he didn't move away. His hands rested on the chair arms on either side of her, effectively caging her in. "But you shouldn't have to be steel, Eleanor. You should be able to be soft, safe." "I feel safe here," she whispered. "With you." Something broke in Jacob's expression. All the careful control, the maintained distance, the walls he'd built crumbling. "Eleanor, I know what you're going to say," she interrupted. "That it's not appropriate, that I work for you, that I'm vulnerable and you're taking advantage. But none of that is true, Jacob. I'm here because I choose to be. And if I—" She took a breath, gathered her courage. "If I have feelings for you, that's my choice too." "You don't know what you're saying." But Jacob didn't move away. "You've been through trauma. You're recovering. You might feel gratitude or safety or—" "I know the difference between gratitude and love," Eleanor said firmly. "I'm not some fragile doll who doesn't understand her own heart. I've been through hell, Jacob. And I came out the other side knowing exactly what I want, what I feel." "What do you feel?" The question was barely audible, and she could see the war in his eyes, hope battling with fear. "I feel like I finally come home," Eleanor said simply. "I feel like when you smile at me, the sun breaks through clouds. I feel like your happiness matters more to me than my own. I feel like I could spend the rest of my life here, on this ranch, with you, and never once regret it." She reached up, touched his face gently. "I feel love, Jacob. Real, true, terrifying love." "Eleanor." Her name on his lips was prayer and curse combined. "I can't. If something happened to you, if I failed to protect you the way I failed to protect Sarah—" "You didn't fail Sarah," Eleanor said fiercely. "You weren't the one who hurt her. Her husband was, and you can't live your whole life punishing yourself for something you couldn't prevent." "She died," Jacob's voice broke. "I should have seen the signs, should have—" "You're seeing them now," Eleanor interrupted. "You saw me in that saloon, saw someone who needed help, and you offered it. You gave me safety, respect, and the chance to build a new life. You didn't fail Sarah, Jacob, but you are honoring her memory by helping me." Thunder crashed outside, rattling the windows. Rain hammered on the roof in a constant roar. And in the kitchen of the Triple G Ranch House, Jacob Garrett looked at Eleanor Hartwell like she was the answer to a prayer he'd been afraid to speak. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "That's not for you to decide," Eleanor said. "I choose you, Jacob. I choose this. I choose us." For a long moment, he just stared at her, those storm-gray eyes searching her face. Then, slowly, carefully, he lifted one hand to cup her cheek. His palm was warm, calloused, infinitely gentle. "If we do this," he said softly, "we do it right. Not hidden, not shameful. I won't dishonor you that way." "I know," Eleanor breathed. "And we go slow. So slow you could change your mind at any point." "I won't change my mind." "But you could. You need to know that you could." His thumb stroked across her cheekbone. "You need to know that you have all the power here, Eleanor. You say stop, we stop. You say no, I walk away. Your choices, your pace, always. Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes. Has anyone ever told you that you're a good man, Jacob Garrett? Mrs. Chen used to, he said with a ghost of a smile, right before she'd threatened to hit me with her wooden spoon if I tracked mud in the house. Eleanor laughed through her tears, and then Jacob was leaning in, moving so slowly she could have stopped him at any moment. His lips brushed hers, feather-light, asking rather than demanding. She answered by leaning into him, one hand coming up to rest on his chest, where she could feel his heart hammering. The kiss was sweet, gentle, and achingly tender. When Jacob pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I've loved you since I saw you standing in that saloon, trying to trade your grandmother's ring for a meal and holding on to your dignity with both hands. I've loved you every day since, and I'll love you every day for the rest of my life if you'll let me." "I'll let you," Eleanor whispered. "I'll let you, and I'll love you right back." Outside, the storm raged. Inside, two broken people found each other and began, finally, to heal. The summer passed in a haze of happiness that Eleanor had never imagined possible. She and Jacob courted properly. Walks in the evening after the work was done. Conversations on the porch as the stars emerged. Stolen kisses in the barn when the hands weren't looking. But Jacob kept his word about propriety. Eleanor still had her room with its lock, and he still slept downstairs. "I'm going to marry you," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. "But I want to do it right. I want you to have the dress and the preacher and everyone in Silver Ridge knowing that Eleanor Hartwell is choosing to become Eleanor Garrett of her own free will." "I am choosing it," Eleanor said, tilting her head up to look at him. "Every single day, I choose you." "I know," he kissed her forehead, "but I want the world to know it too." They set the wedding for the first Saturday in September, after the last of the hay was in and before the fall cattle drive. Eleanor worked with the local seamstress on a dress, simple but beautiful, made of cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Jacob ordered a ring from Denver, a simple gold band engraved with prairie roses. But happiness, Eleanor had learned, was never allowed to last unmolested. It was late August when the riders came to the Triple G. Eleanor was in the garden, harvesting tomatoes, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She looked up to see 5 men riding into the yard, and her blood turned to ice. Silas Blackwood sat on a coal-black horse, his cruel face set in lines of possessive fury. Behind him were 4 of his men, hired guns by the look of them, with tied-down holsters and dead eyes. "Eleanor!" Silas's voice carried across the yard. "There you are, darling. You've led me on quite a chase." Jacob emerged from the barn, his expression going hard when he saw the visitors. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "I'm here for what's mine," Silas said, swinging down from his horse. "My fiancé seems to have gotten lost on the way to our wedding." "I'm not your fiancé," Eleanor called out, moving toward the porch where Jacob stood. "That contract was signed under duress. It's not valid." "That's for a judge to decide," Silas said smoothly. "And lucky for us, Judge Morrison happens to be in Silver Ridge this week. I'm sure he'll be happy to clarify the legal situation." "The legal situation is that Miss Hartwell is an employee of the Triple G Ranch," Jacob said, moving down the porch steps to place himself between Eleanor and Silas. "And she's under my protection." Silas laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Your protection? She's a woman, Garrett. She doesn't get to decide her own future. Her father signed a binding contract, one that Judge Morrison will uphold. "Over my dead body," Jacob said quietly, and Eleanor felt fear spike through her at the look on his face. "That can be arranged," one of Silas's men said, his hand drifting toward his gun. "Hold on." Tom Reeves, Jacob's foreman, emerged from the barn with 3 other ranch hands, all of them armed. "Now, I don't know what's going on here, but seems to me you're threatening my boss. That ain't wise." Silas's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. 5 of them against 5 of Jacob's men, with Jacob himself making 6. The odds weren't in his favor for a direct confrontation. He smiled, cold and calculating. "This isn't over, Eleanor," he said. "I have the law on my side. Judge Morrison will see it my way, and when he does, you'll be coming home with me, where you belong." He looked at Jacob. "And you, Garrett, will learn not to interfere with another man's property." "She's not property," Jacob repeated, his voice deadly calm. "And if you come back here, you won't like what happens." Silas mounted his horse, his men following suit. "We'll see you in town, darling, at the courthouse, tomorrow at noon." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Best put on something pretty. It'll be a special occasion, our reunion." They rode out, leaving dust and dread in their wake. Eleanor realized she was shaking. Jacob turned immediately, pulling her into his arms. "It's all right," he murmured into her hair. "I won't let him take you. I swear it." "He's right about Judge Morrison," Eleanor said, her voice muffled against his chest. "The judge is in Blackwood's pocket. He'll uphold the contract. Then we'll fight it in a higher court. That could take months, years." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. "Jacob, he won't wait that long. If the judge rules in his favor tomorrow, Silas will force me to leave with him. And once I'm under his control—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Jacob's jaw set in a stubborn line. "Then we don't give him the chance. We get married. Tonight." Eleanor blinked. "What?" "If you're already married, that contract is void. He can't force you to marry him if you're already someone's wife." Jacob cupped her face in his hands. "Eleanor, I know it's not the wedding we planned. No dress, no ceremony, just a quick trip to the preacher in Silver Ridge. But it would be legal. It would be binding. And it would keep you safe. Are you sure?" Eleanor searched his face. "Jacob, you wanted to do this right. I wanted you to have a choice," Jacob interrupted. "And you do. You can say no. You can run, and I'll help you get somewhere Blackwood can't find you. Or you can marry me tonight, and we'll face whatever comes together." His gray eyes were intense, blazing with determination. "But Eleanor, understand this. If you marry me, it's real. Not just a legal convenience. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. And if we do this, we do it as partners, equals, together." Together. The word that had become their touchstone, their promise. Eleanor took a breath, felt the weight of the decision settle over her. She could run again, spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, never settling, never building anything real. Or she could stand and fight for the life she wanted, the man she loved, the home she'd found. "Together," she said firmly. "Let's do this together." They rode to Silver Ridge as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Tom Reeves came with them, along with 2 other hands for protection. The town was quiet as they dismounted in front of the small white church where Reverend Miller lived with his wife. The Reverend was surprised to see them at such an hour. But when Jacob explained the situation, his weathered face set in determined lines. "Been hearing stories about this Silas Blackwood," he said. "Man's got a reputation for cruelty. If you're willing to stand against him, I'm willing to perform the ceremony." They gathered in the simple church, Eleanor in her everyday calico dress, Jacob in his work clothes, both of them dusty from the ride. Mrs. Miller stood as witness alongside Tom Reeves, and the Reverend opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice echoing in the small space. Eleanor barely heard the traditional words. She was too focused on Jacob, on the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, on the warm strength of his hands holding hers, on the promise in his storm-gray eyes. "Do you, Jacob Garrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Jacob said, his voice steady and sure. "And do you, Eleanor Hartwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Eleanor whispered, and felt tears slip down her cheeks. Jacob slid the simple gold band onto her finger, the one he'd ordered from Denver with prairie roses engraved around the band. Then he added a second ring, and Eleanor gasped. Her grandmother's garnet ring, the one she'd tried to trade for a meal that first desperate night, now sat beside the wedding band. "You kept it," she breathed. "I found it when I was paying for your meal," Jacob said softly. "You'd left it on the table. I've been holding it for you, waiting for the right time to return it." He smiled. Seemed like now was that time. "By the power vested in me by the Montana Territory and Almighty God," Reverend Miller announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jacob, you may kiss your bride." Jacob pulled Eleanor to him, and this kiss was different from the careful, gentle ones they'd shared before. This was promise and possession, tenderness and passion, a claiming that went both ways. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor saw love and fierce protectiveness blazing in her husband's eyes. "My wife," he said wonderingly. "My husband," Eleanor replied, and felt joy burst through her chest like sunrise. They signed the marriage certificate, and Reverend Miller promised to file it with the territorial records first thing in the morning. As they left the church, Eleanor as Eleanor Garrett, for the first time, she felt something shift inside her. No longer running, no longer alone, no longer property to be bargained or sold. She was Jacob's wife, and he was her husband. Together. The next day at noon, they stood in the Silver Ridge Courthouse, facing Judge Morrison and Silas Blackwood. "This is preposterous," Silas was saying, his face red with fury. "The contract was signed legally. Her father had no right to sell her into marriage," Jacob interrupted calmly. "And even if the contract was valid, which it isn't, it's moot now. Eleanor is already married. To me." He placed the marriage certificate on the judge's desk. Judge Morrison examined it with narrowed eyes, clearly unhappy but unable to dispute the legal document. "This is a travesty," Silas snarled. "You can't just—" "I can, and I did," Jacob said. "Eleanor is my wife, legally, properly, and with the full consent of both parties. Your contract has no standing." "Your Honor," Silas turned to the judge, "there must be something." "There isn't," Judge Morrison said, though his tone was reluctant. "The marriage certificate is legitimate, properly filed, and predates any claim you might have had. The matter is settled." "This isn't over," Silas hissed at Eleanor. "Your father still owes me $20,000. I'll have my due, one way or another. "You'll leave Mrs. Garrett alone," Jacob said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "And if you have a problem with gambling debts, you take it up with the gambler, not his daughter. She's not responsible for her father's mistakes." Silas took a step toward them, and suddenly Tom Reeves was there, along with 4 other Triple G hands, all of them looking ready for trouble. "I think it's time for you to leave, Blackwood," Tom said mildly. "Silver Ridge has a real strong dislike for men who threaten women." For a moment, it looked like Silas might push it. Then he seemed to think better of facing down 6 armed ranch hands in a courthouse full of witnesses. He turned on his heel and stalked out, his men following. Eleanor sagged against Jacob, relief making her knees weak. "It's really over. It's really over," Jacob confirmed, wrapping his arm around her waist. "You're safe. You're mine. And I'm yours. Forever." They walked out of the courthouse into brilliant sunshine, and Eleanor felt like she was truly seeing the world for the first time. Free, safe, loved. The ride back to the Triple G was quiet, both of them processing everything that had happened. As they approached the ranch, Eleanor saw that someone had strung flowers across the porch railing, prairie roses and wild lupin, creating a makeshift wedding decoration. "Mrs. Miller must have sent word," Jacob said with a smile. "Looks like we're getting a reception after all." The ranch hands had gathered in the yard, all of them grinning. Tom Reeves stepped forward with a bottle of whiskey. "To Mr. and Mrs. Garrett," he announced, "may your marriage be long, your cattle be fat, and your winters be mild." Everyone cheered, and Eleanor found herself passed from hand to hand as each man offered congratulations. They were genuine, she realized. These rough cowboys were truly happy for them. As the sun began to set, the hands drifted back to the bunkhouse, leaving Jacob and Eleanor alone on the porch. The valley spread before them, painted in twilight colors, purple shadows and golden light, the promise of night and the memory of day. "So," Jacob said softly, "Mrs. Garrett, how does it feel?" "Like coming home," Eleanor said simply. "Like finding the place I was always meant to be." Jacob turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "I know this wasn't the wedding you deserved. No fancy dress, no guests, no celebration." Eleanor stopped him with a kiss. "It was perfect," she said firmly. "Because it was real, because it was us, because we chose each other, and we did it together." She smiled. "Everything else is just decoration." "Still," Jacob said, "I want to do something to mark this properly, to show you how much this means, how much you mean." Eleanor looked at him, at this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, physically, emotionally, spiritually, who had given her safety and respect and love without asking for anything in return, who had married her not out of obligation or desire to possess, but out of pure, genuine love. "Show me," she whispered. Jacob's eyes darkened, understanding flooding his expression. "Eleanor, we're married," she said simply. "Really married, and I want to be your wife in every way, if you want that too." "If I want?" Jacob laughed, the sound rough and incredulous. "Eleanor, I've wanted that since the day you walked into my kitchen in Sarah's dress and made me the best coffee I'd had in months. But I need you to be sure. This is important. It changes things." "I am sure," Eleanor said firmly. "I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, Jacob Garrett, and I want to share everything with you, starting tonight." Jacob searched her face one more time, then nodded slowly. He lifted her into his arms. Eleanor gasped at the sudden movement and carried her through the door and up the stairs. "Where are we going?" Eleanor asked, though her heart was already racing. To our room, Jacob said. Not yours, not mine, ours. He carried her to the master bedroom, the one that had been his alone, and set her gently on her feet beside the bed. The last rays of sunlight streamed through the window, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. We go at your pace, Jacob said, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You're in control here, Eleanor, always. Eleanor looked at this man, her husband, and felt her heart overflow with love and trust and desire. She reached up, began unbuttoning his shirt with fingers that trembled only slightly. Together, she said, we do this together. And they did. The months that followed were the happiest of Eleanor's life. She and Jacob settled into married life with the ease of two people who had already been partners in every way but name. They worked side by side during the day, Eleanor managing the house and accounts while Jacob ran the ranch operations. And at night, they fell into each other's arms with joy and passion that never seemed to fade. Eleanor learned that Jacob was a generous lover, attentive and careful, always ensuring her pleasure before seeking his own. She learned the landscape of his body, the scars and marks that told his history, the places that made him gasp, the way he whispered her name like a prayer when he was lost in sensation. And Jacob learned her, the careful healing of trauma, the gradual building of trust, the moment when she finally surrendered all her defenses and gave herself completely to his care. He was patient, endlessly patient, and protective in ways that empowered rather than constrained. I never knew it could be like this, Eleanor confessed one night, lying in the curve of Jacob's arm, her head on his chest, where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. Like what? His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. Safe and exciting at the same time, tender and passionate, like I'm treasured but also desired. She tilted her head to look at him, like I'm an equal partner, not just something to be used. Jacob's jaw tightened. You should always have been treated that way. You deserved. I have it now, Eleanor interrupted. That's what matters. I have you, I have this life, I have everything I never dared to dream about. We have it, Jacob corrected gently. We have each other. We have this life we're building together. Together. Always together. Winter came to Montana with snow that transformed the valley into something magical. Eleanor learned to navigate the cold months, the careful preparation of supplies, the importance of keeping fires going, the beauty of frost patterns on windows, and she learned something else, something that filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She was pregnant, Eleanor told Jacob on a Sunday morning in February, as they sat by the fire with coffee and quiet companionship. She'd been trying to find the right words for a week, terrified of his reaction, despite knowing he would never be anything but supportive. Jacob, she said finally, I need to tell you something. He looked up from the book he'd been reading, Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and immediately focused all his attention on her. What is it? I'm going to have a baby. The words came out in a rush. I'm pregnant. I think about 3 months along, and I know we haven't really talked about children yet, and I don't know if you're ready, but Jacob set down his book very carefully. Then he was across the room, kneeling in front of her chair, his hands covering hers. Eleanor, he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. Are you happy about this? I am, she said, tears gathering in her eyes. I'm scared, but I'm happy. Are you? Happy? Jacob laughed. The sound choked. Eleanor, I'm terrified and thrilled and so full of love I can barely breathe. A baby. Our baby. He pressed his forehead to her knees. I'm going to be a father. You're going to be a wonderful father, Eleanor said, running her fingers through his hair. You're already the best husband, the best partner, the best man I've ever known. Jacob looked up, and she saw tears tracking down his cheeks. I swear to you, he said fiercely, I will protect you both with everything I have. Our child will grow up safe, loved, and free. No one will ever hurt either of you, not while I'm alive. I know, Eleanor said simply. I trust you completely. Their daughter was born in early September, just as the first hints of autumn touched the valley. The birth was hard. Eleanor labored for almost 20 hours, while Jacob paced outside the bedroom, driven nearly mad by the sound of her pain. When Doc Parker finally emerged to tell him he had a healthy baby girl and that Eleanor was fine, Jacob nearly collapsed with relief. He entered the bedroom to find Eleanor propped against pillows, exhausted but glowing, with a tiny bundle in her arms. Meet your daughter, Eleanor said softly. Sarah Rose Garrett. Jacob's breath caught. You named her after my sister. I wanted to honor her, Eleanor said. She brought you to that saloon that night. She's part of why we found each other, and I want our daughter to carry her name, so she's never forgotten. Jacob sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at his daughter, impossibly small, with a tuft of dark hair and Eleanor's delicate features. When she opened her eyes, they were gray like his. Hello, Sarah, he whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby grasped it immediately, and Jacob felt his heart crack open with love so fierce it was almost painful. I'm your papa, and I promise you, little one, you will grow up knowing you are loved, knowing you are strong, knowing you can be anything you want to be. Eleanor watched her husband fall in love with their daughter and felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks. This was what she'd been running toward without knowing it. This family, this love, this life. The years passed in the rhythm of ranch life, seasons turning, cattle growing, the land giving and taking in equal measure. Jacob and Eleanor weathered droughts and harsh winters, market crashes and abundant harvests. They welcomed a son 2 years after Sarah, a dark-haired boy they named William Jacob, followed 3 years later by another daughter, Catherine. The Triple G prospered under their partnership. Eleanor's head for figures and Jacob's knowledge of ranching made them formidable, and they expanded the operation carefully, always reinvesting in the land and the people who worked it. But more than prosperity, they built a home, a place of love and laughter, of hard work and simple pleasures, of sunset rides and starlit conversations. They built a life where their children grew up knowing they were treasured, where the ranch hands were treated like family, where justice and mercy walked hand in hand. And through it all, Jacob and Eleanor remained what they'd always been, partners. In every decision, every challenge, every triumph and setback, they faced the world together. 20 years after that first desperate night in the Last Chance Saloon, Eleanor Garrett stood on the porch of the Triple G Ranch House, watching the sun set over the valley she'd come to love. Her hair was threaded with silver now, and fine lines marked her face, evidence of years spent squinting into prairie sun and smiling at the people she loved. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of family. Sarah practicing piano in the parlor, William arguing good-naturedly with his father about cattle rotation, little Catherine begging for one more story before bed. The sounds of home. Jacob emerged from the house, sliding his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest in the way he'd done 1,000 times before. His hair was more silver than brown now, and his body bore the marks of decades of hard work. But when she turned in his arms, his storm-gray eyes held the same love they'd always held. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "That night in the saloon," Eleanor admitted. "The night you refused to let me trade my grandmother's ring for a meal." "Best decision I ever made," Jacob said, kissing her temple. "Pat and marrying you the next day." "Best decision we ever made," Eleanor corrected. "We made it together, remember?" "Together," Jacob echoed, smiling. "Always together." They stood like that as the sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, as the first stars began to emerge, as the valley settled into twilight peace. Two people who had found each other at their lowest moments and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. Eleanor touched the 2 rings on her finger, the simple gold wedding band and her grandmother's garnet ring, both worn smooth by years of wear. Symbols of heritage and future, of promises kept and love honored. "I love you," she said, "not for the first time and never for the last." "I love you too," Jacob replied. "From that first moment in the saloon until my last breath, you're the best thing that ever happened to me, Eleanor Garrett." "We're the best thing that ever happened to each other," Eleanor corrected. "Partners, equals, together." And in the gathering darkness of the Montana evening, they held each other and watched the stars emerge. 2 survivors who had become warriors. 2 broken people who had made each other whole. 2 hearts that had found their home in each other. Together, as they'd always been. Together, as they'd always be. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Jacob and Eleanor's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.